Tonight at 7, Roman Catholic dioceses across Michigan are preparing for the worst from a state investigation into decades of priest abuse. The possibility that the state attorney general's office could uncover more abusive priests, more cover-ups, and more victims than ever before revealed. Tonight, in our half-hour special, After the Fall, Target 8 investigator Ken Colger and photojournalist Bilal Kurdi examine the legacies of two of the most notorious priests to ever work in the Grand Rapids Diocese. One is dead. The other still lives in a West Michigan neighborhood where his past has been unknown. We do want to warn you that tonight's show is graphic and may not be appropriate for everyone. Here's Target 8 investigator Ken Colger.
Brian, by sheer numbers alone, these are Grand Rapids' two most notorious Roman Catholic priests. Fathers John Sullivan and Dennis Wagner, who molested at least 15 children between them in West Michigan. Their stories show how the church allowed them to keep molesting and how it continues to haunt their survivors. No matter how many years pass, the memories will not. The bad burn deepest. Like what happened in the small log cabin to a 12-year-old girl who thought she was Father Sullivan's one and only, or what she saw through the small second-floor window on the south side of the family home. The window there on the left, as her abuser walked away with his arm around her little sister.
And I knew what he was going to be doing.
The pew in a small country church where the priest first approached a 14-year-old girl who wanted to be a nun, his latest prey. The spot on Campbell Lake about 100 yards out where a 12-year-old altar boy went swimming with a priest he idolized. Then there's the confessional where the abused went to their abuser for forgiveness for sins that they thought were their own. And you would see his face?
Well, you only get to see a profile like this. So I knew it was him because he was, you'd see him walk in there to do confessions.
Years, even decades later, the survivors are still working through the aftermath. The lost trust, faith, innocence, and the betrayal by the church they loved. They are among at least 33 survivors of 14 priests who molested children in the Grand Rapids Diocese since the late 1950s. 5 of the abusers are still living in West Michigan, most collecting pensions and health benefits.
They're so powerful, and we were just nothing. We weren't anything.
Father John Sullivan was new to Grand Rapids in 1958, welcomed by a diocese that was aware of his scandalous past, but short on priests.
He was very charismatic, big, beautiful smile, handsome man. And plus he came from the East Coast. He was sophisticated and we weren't.
The priest from New Hampshire quickly worked his way into the Viventi family through Holy Spirit Church.
They loved him. My mother adored him.
Soon he was living with the Viventis on what was then a farm road in the city of Walker.
I could see the dress I wore. I could see the sidewalk. I can see the rectory. I can see his bedroom.
Fran was 12 when her mom let Father Sullivan teach her about the birds and the bees at the rectory at St. Jude's. It was his idea.
Oh, it was a pretty little party dress because my mother had me get all dressed up to go see Father Sullivan so we could have our talk.
Her mom, brother, and 2 sisters waited out in the car.
Pulls out this book about sex. He's going to teach me all this stuff. And that's the first time. You lay down here, this is what I'm going to do, you know, and this is our deep, dark secret.
The first of many sexual encounters with her priest that she saw at first as love. She thought she was his girlfriend. He was 41. Remember, she was 12. And he raped you?
Yes. Yeah. Took a long time for me to call it that because I just laid there. I didn't fight anything. What was I going to do?
At St. Jude's Rectory, on trips with him to the East Coast, in that old log cabin just down the road from her family home.
Every chance he got. It seemed to me like every chance he got.
She was about 14 after more than a year of abuse when she looked toward the field out the upstairs window of her family's home.
And I see Sullivan with his arm around my little sister. And I knew what he was going to be doing. I don't want to be emotional. I want to just tell you. Oh my God, he's going to hurt my little sister.
Headed toward that old log cabin.
So I wrote this little note, and I said that unless he stopped touching, fooling around with my sister, I was going to, quote unquote, spill the beans. And I put that little note in his prayer book.
The next day, Father Sullivan was gone. What she didn't know is that he had already been raping her two sisters, then 11 and 7. Her baby sister Mary told Target 8 in an email that Sullivan raped her for the first time when she was 7 in a broom closet at Holy Spirit, while her mom was arranging flowers on the altar. It was the spring of her Holy Communion. Quote unquote, "It was fast and painful," she wrote. A photograph dated June 1958, shortly after her first communion, shows Mary in her front yard, near the Virgin Mary grotto her dad was building. On a sticky note, she wrote that Sullivan had already assaulted her several times. Quote, "My body was in spasm. I could hardly stand up straight." During one rape, she suffered ruptured discs in her neck. It wasn't long, they say, before Father Sullivan brought another girl to the family home. That girl was 14, a devout Catholic who attended St. Anthony's, an old farm church near Grand Haven.
He came to me after church and said how fervently I prayed, and I told him that I wanted to be a sister. I wanted to be a nun. And he said, well, I could help you with that.
He asked her to help count the Sunday offering at the rectory at nearby St. Patrick's, where he raped her. It was the first of the attacks.
At least a dozen.
That went on for a year. She took what she believed were her sins to the confessional. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," she said.
And I am heartily sorry if I haven't offended you, because I thought I was in a state of mortal sin and couldn't go to communion anymore. That's why I went to confession.
To the guy who was
Yes,
molesting
to Father Sullivan.
To the man who was molesting you.
Yes.
You asked him to reach out to God, right? Because that's his job, to forgive your sins.
Right. He said I had nothing to forgive. I didn't do anything wrong, and that I couldn't go to communion.
About 35 years ago, she confessed to a priest in another parish who sent her to the Grand Rapids Diocese for therapy. She quit that after 6 sessions, she said, because the therapist kept asking the same question.
So she asked me, well, was he good looking?
She later seriously considered driving into a bayou, then ended up at Pine Rest. She has not heard from the diocese in decades.
I just trying to put it out of my mind. And I just go on because I love my church.
She's 73 now, still Catholic, goes to the same church where it happened, where nobody knows her story. Most of her children did not know. Her husband of 50 years knew few details until she sat down with Target 8 at their dining room table just before Christmas, still blaming herself.
It's part of it. I was old enough to know that probably what he was doing was wrong.
You're 14.
I know that.
The next day, she left a voicemail.
I just wanted to call and let you know that I think I had a Christmas miracle. You were my Christmas miracle. God sent you to me. Because for how many years I prayed, please God, take this guilt away.
After the break, an apology hundreds of miles away, finally. Now, back to our special After the Fall. A priest abuse survivor finally gets an apology 800 miles away. Here again is Ken Kolker.
Definitely brings back a lot of memories.
To the summer of 1985.
Nothing was ever the same. So, lost a lot of childhood out here.
Chris Burry was a 12-year-old altar boy at Holy Family in Caledonia.
Well, we were on a pontoon boat. I don't know, probably a good 100 yards, 200 yards out in the water.
On Campbell Lake, not far from the Burry family home. He idolized his priests, Donald Heidens and Dennis Wagner.
That's all I wanted to be. I mean, I remember, playing Mass at home and practicing. It was a big honor for me to be an altar server.
Wagner was 38, had become a family friend.
Brookins, Gibson, and Parrish, the
He watched the Detroit Tigers on their TV. He ate popcorn with them on their back porch. On that summer day, Chris went swimming with friends, joined by Father Denny. Far from everybody else, the view blocked by that pontoon boat, the priest grabbed Chris from behind.
I tried and struggled to get away from him.
He struggles to say what the priest did.
In today's standards would, that's...
Would it be a rape?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
The attack, he says, lasted a half hour.
Just laughed. And
the young altar boy broke free, swam to shore, and ran home in his bathing suit and bare feet. He says he would have quit the church back then if not for playing guitar in the church band. By the late 1980s, Wagner was gone from Holy Family, and Burry was in high school. Burry recalls walking into Holy Family with his guitar for Saturday night mass, and paramedics pushing Wagner out on a gurney. He had no idea his molester was filling in that night. Wagner had fallen and hurt himself in church.
Instantly, he locked eyes on mine, and he reached out and he grabbed my hand and forearm very forcefully and would not let go, and just stared. It was a very dark stare.
Burry reported the abuse in the early 1990s, just beyond the statute of limitations. He first got 10 therapy sessions through the diocese, then $10,000 after telling the church he needed more help. Then he learned he was one of at least 6 victims of the priest he once idolized.
That article,
So they told you were the only one?
They told me that I was the only one. Yep.
In fact, 2 years before Wagner raped Burry, the priest was accused of repeatedly molesting a 13-year-old boy on a tubing trip in Muskegon County. Wagner at the time was serving at St. Michael's in Coopersville. A felony gross indecency charge turned into simple assault, and instead of sending him to jail, the judge thanked the priest for his service.
All this could have easily been prevented. A lifetime of heartache and pain.
Burry pushed the diocese for more therapy money, got $50,000. Wagner is 70 now, defrocked from the church, living on a quiet dead-end street in Norton Shores where neighbors did not know of his past. Chris Burry is married with a young daughter. He sells medical devices and owns a medical consulting company. He still sees a therapist, though the church money ran out long ago.
I'm 45 years old and I still struggle at the hands of the church and from what he had done, yes.
You think your paper has the resources to take that on?
Like when the movie Spotlight, about priest abuse in Boston, played on the back of the seat in front of him on a recent flight. At the end, the list of cities with reported abuse started on the screen. Grand Rapids.
And that's you.
He melted into his seat and cried.
Almost a feeling, it's an overwhelming feeling of almost a panic. It sends you spiraling.
He is still drawn to the Catholic Church, but prefers talking with God in a Buddhist temple or while fly fishing. Though last year, the man who once longed for the priesthood found himself wandering into the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in Providence, Rhode Island, during a work trip.
Sat in the pew and just wept.
A young priest approached, and Burry went to confession for the first time since the attack. He told the young priest what had happened.
And for the first time ever, did I feel compassion from somebody within the church of that leadership, of that role. And he had put his hand on my shoulder and respectfully, compassionately, just simply said, "I apologize. I am so sorry." And I melted. I, broke down. I cried. He gave me a hug, and I wasn't afraid.
The Grand Rapids Diocese refused to set up an interview with Bishop David Walkowiak, citing the ongoing AG's investigation. So Target 8 caught up with him after a recent mass. The bishop defended the church, saying sweeping changes in 2002 are doing more to protect children.
The church is a lot different than it was.
He said he was not familiar with some of the Grand Rapids cases.
I don't even know the years that Father Sullivan was a priest. I am from the Cleveland Diocese.
58, 59. And it was a long time ago.
But
these survivors still live with it every day. If you were to talk to her.
Well, that's true. We are always keeping the survivors in mind and praying for them. And we offer them any help that they need.
After the break, how a predator priest's legacy, decades later, now helps protect children. We're back now with the final chapter of tonight's special report, After the Fall, and an epilogue 1,500 miles away.
Not a lot has changed around the old Viventi home in Walker, where West Michigan's most notorious priest once lived. That log cabin down the street still stands. So does the stone grotto with the Virgin Mary in the family's front yard, built by Romeo Viventi at the request of Father Sullivan, the priest who secretly had stolen his 3 young daughters' virginity.
It's like what's ongoing is just this deep, deep sadness that it happened to my sisters.
Not to you?
Yeah, not me.
So your deep sadness is for your sisters?
Yeah.
Because you're the big sister?
Yeah.
And that was your job?
Yeah.
Even though Sullivan had raped her repeatedly for at least a year, the 3 sisters raped by Father Sullivan when they were 12, 11, and 7 did not start talking with each other about it until they were in their 30s. The attacks in the rectory, in the broom closet, in that log cabin near the family home.
But I get emotional when I think about that priest and his power and how it was all fake, because that same guy who was holding the host and the wine, almost like in a trance and saying he was turning it into the body and blood of Christ, he was the same one who was molesting you, assaulting you, and your sisters.
Their parents, Santina and Romeo Viventi, never knew. The sisters kept their secret until their parents died within 10 months of each other in 1990 and 91. Then they sued the diocese. That was before they learned about Sullivan's past, before Grand Rapids. As a priest in New Hampshire, he got a young girl pregnant and paid for an abortion that did not work before his son was born October 27th, 1949, 2 pounds, 4 ounces, and later adopted. Sullivan's son would be 69 now. Later, still a priest in New Hampshire, Sullivan stalked a nursing student and had what was described as an affair with a high school girl. After suspending him, the New Hampshire diocese warned bishops in Grand Rapids and across the country after the priest started shopping himself around. Quote, "I feel that every inquiring bishop should know some of the circumstances that range from parenthood, attempted suicide, and abortion," the warning read. But the Grand Rapids Diocese took a chance in 1958 because of its quote-unquote dire need for priests. Within a year and a half after molesting as many as 9 girls in West Michigan and giving STDs to the 3 Viventi sisters, Sullivan moved out west to molest more girls. The Grand Rapids Diocese called him a psychopath. The Viventi sisters wanted more than $1 million from the Grand Rapids Diocese, but settled for $500,000 in 1994. Sullivan died a priest in 1999, buried in Arizona, never criminally charged.
Instead of dying as a priest, should he have died with an inmate number?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Today, more than 60 years after they were abused, Fran is 73, living alone in Central Florida. She's a visiting psych nurse. Her sisters are also in the field of mental health.
Well, there was always this sense that my only value in life was, if somebody saw me like a sexual being, somebody that was desirable.
They've never returned to the Catholic Church. What would she say now to the little girl whose innocence, faith, and trust were stolen by her priest?
that you matter, that you're valuable, that you have value, that you matter, that you're somebody's princess. Yeah, thank God.
That it was not your fault.
Yeah, that was not my fault. I couldn't do any more to save them. You know?
To save them?
My sisters.
There is an epilogue to Father John Sullivan's story playing out in Miami through the son of one of the priest survivors. Fran Heinemann's son, Charles, is an assistant state's attorney in Miami-Dade County, doing the kind of work most DAs would rather avoid.
Pretty cool, innocent kids that you see just not getting a shot in this world. It sucks. Yeah, it really does.
Prosecuting child molesters. Is he fixing things? Is that what you think he might be trying to do?
I think so. But I don't know if he knows that.
While he won't go that far, her son says it has prepared him better for the job.
Like, I understood it. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, these things go on. Monsters are out there, you know.
The state's attorney general has set up a hotline for priest abuse survivors to talk. Now, we have that number listed on your screen, and it is posted on woodtv.com. The state also created a hotline that is staffed 24/7 for all sex abuse survivors. That number is 855-VOICES-4.
Ken, excellent work on what must be a difficult topic, obviously. The common thread I noticed from your stories last night and tonight is the stunning lack of compassion on so many levels from the church, both in the past and some might argue in the present.
Some of the survivors feel like they're being treated as if the people they're dealing with are part of a corporation instead of a church. I mean, that's what those survivors really feel.
That's the way it feels like for them.
Yeah.
Ken Kolker. Ken will continue this conversation on Facebook Live. He'll be answering your questions starting at 7:30. We've also just posted a podcast that will take an in-depth look at this story, some of the background behind it. You can find that over at woodtv.com.
Then tonight at 11, Michigan's Attorney General says she's focusing not only on priests but on church leaders who allowed this to happen, even suggesting the possibility of criminal charges.
Thanks for joining us.